This is Mandatory Listening. I'm your host, Kent Mann. Each week, we sit down over a cup of coffee and discuss interesting topics in the world of the customer experience. Welcome back to Mandatory Listening. This is your host, Kent Mann, and this is take 2. I'm joined with Leslie Cunningham, and I threw her off guard with a question, so she wanted to make sure she got her answer right with what book she was reading.
Yes.
And this is the afternoon. Normally we record in the morning, but we didn't wake up until noon today.
It's one of those days.
Yeah.
It's a Wednesday.
You've probably been up for 8 hours already.
Probably.
Yeah.
But no one will ever know.
No one will ever know. Okay. So let's get back to the question. What books are you reading right now? Because everyone knows you have, it looks like 5 books on your nightstand right now.
I have, yes. So I like to read, and I'm a bit of a book snob, if you will, or if I see a book and it jumps out at me, I just buy it. Mm-hmm. So my books that I'm reading right now are Control Theory. I'm reading Identity Leadership, which is by Stedman, who is the partner of Oprah. Very, very interesting read on leadership and has a different perspective on taking control of being a leader and what that looks and feels like. I am also reading Melinda Gates' Moment of Lift, which is how empowering women changes the world. So it's her talking about her efforts on third world countries and really helping empowering women through the use of contraceptions.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And then my more spiritual books are Fulfilling Wishes and How We Create Our Own Destiny by Wayne Dyer. And then I just finished Instruction and talking about the law of attraction and how that plays into business.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. So when you're waking up in the morning, well, first off, I want to hear what your morning routine is. Actually, I want our listeners to hear what your morning routine is.
It's pretty in-depth. So I wake up and have a gratitude journal that I write in every morning. Right now, I am currently taking a finance class. So I do my finance work with that for my class. And then I create my list of things to do for the day. I have about 4 journals that I write in every morning. And then I do my yoga routine followed by a 2-mile walk.
Do you do coffee anymore?
It depends on my mood.
Yeah. If you could have, well, I'm sure it's depending on the mood, because I know for myself, my coffee depends on my mood. But if it's in the morning, what kind of coffee would you pick if you could pick any in the world?
If I had best case scenario, I would have the ultimate espresso machine for the coffee grounds to be grounded into the little thingamajig.
Yeah.
I don't know what those are called. I just know that it tastes really good. So I would totally do probably 2 shots of espresso.
Just black?
Oh, yeah.
All right, nice. Yeah, I've recently gotten into coffee with a little bit of milk, and that has never been a thing for me.
Wow.
Always growing up, I've really enjoyed just a black cup of coffee. But something about it is, it may be unfortunate because it's coming out of necessity to be able to chug my coffee faster so I can get out of the door. But yeah, I've been really just, it cools off the coffee so you can drink it. And I've really just enjoyed the flavor way more than I ever thought. Something about, because I think every time I had it when I was growing up, it was half and half, really cheap half and half with a bunch of white sugar. And so I wasn't really into that. But, with nice, just high quality milk and high quality coffee just together seemed to really do it for me.
A good blend, yeah.
Yep. And so that's been kind of fun.
That's awesome.
So this topic kind of stemmed, or the reason we're doing this podcast is it stemmed from a discussion we had this morning about the frustration around people in a position and they just don't seem to be the right person for the job. It's like this person has 0 sense of urgency, and this job is all about urgency, or this job is all about customer interaction and they hate dealing with people. This job is all about technical skills and this person only wants to deal with people.
Yeah.
So just tell me a little bit about that synopsis or that conversation we had and where it came from.
Well, I think it stemmed from I call it round peg in a square hole.
Yeah.
And what I see in the industries that we serve is that we're so desperate to hire people because we're not building our bench out, that we're hiring for the sake of hiring versus really understanding the job that we're hiring for. Now, I know I need a sales manager or I know I need a sales associate, but when I talk about knowing the job, what are the attributes that you need, not skill set, but attributes that you need for the specific position? And when we can understand that, then we can benchmark towards that position and ask the good questions so that we know that either this person is emotionally intelligent enough that they've evolved and or they are a perfect match for this position.
When you say evolved, do you mean that this person has a breadth of knowledge about themselves and they're honest about themselves, or that they're able to, be a flexible, can kind of maneuver around different positions based on what you need because they're just such an achiever? Do you mean evolved by, what do you mean by that? Because if you have a job that's crafted, and you have very set expectations and goals for this position, this job, and then you find the perfect person for this job, does that mean that person can never advance?
I think that we are all in positions so that we can learn and advance.
Yeah.
I think when you're hiring, let's say the skill set of managing a checkbook, and you have to have that checkbook dialed into the penny every day.
Yeah.
Now, anyone can balance a checkbook. There are people in this world who do it faster and it comes natural to them. And so that's what I'm looking at is what are the natural tendencies of people versus it's a skill set that they can do, but it takes them a lot longer.
Yeah.
And it takes more energy. And when we're in a place of things taking more energy and time, then we're not as productive and it can cause frustration and stress.
Yeah. And that's interesting from a top-down perspective in that, someone who's an owner or is responsible for the bottom line and is looking at money, they can get really frustrated by seeing someone in a wrong position or being like, you have 6 months to improve or you're gone. And it's very, cutthroat and it could be subversive in a certain way. But, I've read a lot of books and thought about this idea of friction and how the most human growth happens when things aren't happening smoothly. How you determine, what kind of person you are and how you get better by those moments that are difficult, not by the ones that are easy.
Sure.
And so I guess I'm just kind of struggling with this idea of being in the perfect position, for 20 years and then you retire, because that would be this idea of friction, that would create the least amount of human growth.
Right.
And so how do we craft these positions? The point of this podcast that I wanted to get out of this was crafting the job itself, then looking for the person.
Correct.
And so once we have an idea of this, how do we have that balance of this job really aligns with this person's skill set, their enthusiasm, their goals in their life, but it's not so easy that they're not being challenged and not becoming stagnant or bored?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of moving components of what we're going to be addressing. And part of it is understanding what it is that you need in the job. So your job description, how many years of experience you need, the skill set that you need in order to fulfill the job.
Yeah.
And then in what capacity do you need the person to manage tasks and projects?
Yeah.
Let's just take that one, for example. Do you need someone who's very urgent and who's very driven and is very task oriented and can set goals? Or do you need someone who is more calm and steady
yeah.
and in
compliant?
In their, yes, compliant is another great word, in their approach to the way that they look at tasks and projects.
Yeah. And if you're looking at like an accountant, they probably need to be very steady,
Correct.
very accurate, very compliant.
Yeah.
And the sense of urgency is probably, of course, any accountant listening to this is being like, of course I'm urgent, like they don't understand my urgency, but still it's not as urgent as like something that is day to day. I need to solve this task within 1 minute.
Right.
And the next task 1 minute like bouncing between people or bouncing between customers
Yeah.
or bouncing on phone calls is a different kind of cadence and urgency than an accounting urgency.
Right. And if you hire someone with a high level of urgency in a role that needs to be more sustainable and steady, I think is the word you used, that's going to create some stress for that in particular individual because things aren't moving fast enough.
Yeah.
And they're going to get angry. They're going to be resentful because that's ultimately what the job is. But we hired a person with a lot of urgency in that position.
Yeah.
So it's a component of hiring that I think is missed oftentimes. I call it benchmarking. I don't like to use that word because I think we might be too reliant on benchmarking and say, well, if you're XYZ, then you don't fit this position, which is why I use the word a person who has evolved. But I think it's important to understand, for example, if you're hiring a sales manager and you need them to drive a team, you need someone with a sense of urgency. If they don't have urgency, that's not right or wrong, but you are going to spend a lot of more time managing that manager to urgency rather than having it come natural.
Yeah. So where would that fit in with, like, let's take an example of someone doing either phone sales or a sales associate on sales floor or, traveling salesperson. How does that transition of, you've hit your sales goals, you've hit your numbers for 5 years now, just the next progressive step is that you would become then a sales manager, even though managing people and their results is completely different than being self-motivated to make your own income.
Right.
So that's like a disconnect. So how do you start there with crafting that job, or maybe that person who you really like and he's a effective person? Do you just increase his income or his incentive to make more sales and he just stays in that good position that he's in? Or do you move him forward to something else, a different title?
This is another really good topic.
Yeah.
That I see a lot in the industries that we are in. And that is, you're a good salesperson. I'm going to promote you to be a manager.
Yep.
And that, again, round peg, square hole.
Yeah.
Did I say that right? I never feel like I say it right.
Doesn't matter. They get the point.
Okay. And it might not necessarily be a fit for the role that you're promoting them to.
Yeah.
And then that really good salesperson has lost all motivation and drive because they're not oriented to manage people. It doesn't mean that they don't have the skill set to manage people, because that can be trained, but they also have a cadence about them. So, for example, salespeople generally have a high aptitude for connection.
Good salespeople.
Yeah. What did I say?
Just salespeople.
Yeah.
Good salespeople.
Good salespeople know how to connect to people.
Yeah.
They know how to get the close. They know how to influence, and they're very persuasive. But they don't have necessarily the aptitude or the
organizational skills
or cadence,
delegation skills
to hold people accountable and to actually lead, because
results.
they're getting their own results and they know how to do it, so they're just going to take it on rather than the skill set of delegation.
Yeah, it's like I was reading this book called The Challenger Sale, and it's where I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's like 90% or 80% of a company's sales team revenue is generated by one salesperson, and the other 20% is just delegated with a bunch of mediocre salespeople.
And so to that point, I would want to keep your good salespeople. Yeah. And create friction around expansion. So you're such a great salesperson. Where are our next avenues for growth?
Yeah.
And keep them there. Don't promote them to manager.
Right.
Or if you do make the choice to promote them to manager, make sure that you're giving them the training and skill set in order to know, here's the things that you're going to be walking into now with this new position.
Yeah, and setting your expectations and being accountable to your own results by saying, this is not a promotion. This is a change in expectations. You're no longer responsible for your own sales. You're responsible for a sales team of 10 people.
That's right.
And their results reflect on you. Is this something that you're willing to opt into?
Correct.
And I think that's one of the biggest disconnects and frustrations with really capitalism in general, but a large section of big corporate environments, because you have these really top line people who don't have the same grinding hours that the lowest level people have, but then they have a 3,000% increase in their income. And so it's like because they've spent the, quote unquote hours in the game, they just get this automatic raise, even if they're not the best person for the CFO position or the CEO position or whatever. They just happen to be the top salesperson for 20 years. And now they're suddenly in this position of, I have to teach people and I have to lead people and I have to influence people and hold people accountable, and they don't have any of those skills. And so you have these really overpaid people with none of the skills or even desire. If they could craft their own position, they would be out probably selling still.
Right.
But they want to make more money. And so I think obviously one of the pushes that we like to advocate for is an incentive-based sales system if you're in a sales position. And then maybe not framing it, but framing it not as a hierarchy of manager, then you're a salesperson, but having them on par because they're both so important. The manager on one side has to hold metrics and see results and look for the next avenue. Here's your next pursuit. And the salesperson actually has to go do the work and get the sale and close the deal. And they're completely different skill sets, and completely different people are good at those positions.
That's right.
So, it's always that balance of creating some good friction as a manager or an owner that someone is going to grow, but not in a way that's like you're on the opposite side of the spectrum of what you're just in the wrong position.
Because you've hired a really good person, a really nice person
someone
who
you
might
like.
have been referred to you by someone you trust, but their skill set and or their characteristics are not in alignment with exactly what you need. And so if you've got someone who is very rule oriented and wants compliance and wants the policies and procedures in a job that you need that person to think outside of the box,
be an entrepreneur,
and be an entrepreneur. It's going to stress them out, and it's going to cause more stress and eventually health concerns in that position than it would the position that would suit that person, which is really governing over rules and regulations.
I have a really close friend in Charlotte, North Carolina, who's actually a police officer, and I met some of his friends from his class, and, I know him as a person. And a lot of these people who go in to become police officers are motivated by serving the community, being physically active, performing to a standard, somewhat compliant with rules and regulations, and, take their job very seriously, take that position extremely seriously. But they spend most of their time writing reports. And so they're in an office typing up what they just did, and they have to write these 6-page reports about what just happened. Okay, what did you do next? Okay, what did you find when you walked in the room? And all this stuff that is completely outside of their interest. And that's why, something like, I can't remember that, like, I'm horrible with statistics right now, but my friend, he was telling me that when cops retire, they just have a much higher rate of heart attack or stress or anxiety or just, and I can imagine by being in a job for 30 years, that's not only high stress physically, mentally, you have to think outside the box, you have to solve problems all day long, but also you have to spend hours upon hours writing these stupid reports that you don't want to, of course they're important, but it's probably the wrong person for the job. And so I just found that to be really interesting. And I think and even too, like being the best cop on the force and then getting promoted to chief, and then you still spend all your time, writing, typing, and meeting people and not serving, which is why you got in the job in the first place. So let's take it back down to earth really quick. And I want to ask, where do you start when you have a list? Let's say you have 10 positions you need to fill. Where do you start with each of those positions and defining the expectations for them before you find the people?
Well, if you have 10 positions open right now, I'm sorry.
Well, 10 positions in a 1,000-person organization, maybe.
I would love to help.
That statistic, yeah.
I think it's important. Well, first of all, you're always going to have a good job description. So you want to make sure that you're clear on the experience that you need, the amount of previous experience had, and then what are the day-to-day details that this person will be doing. And from there, then we start to look at, okay, do we need urgency or do we need a systematic approach or do we need both?
Yeah.
And we begin to accumulate the areas of most important. So we begin to rank those characteristics. So for example, if you need someone who can connect with people, you need someone who's going to be optimistic. Someone who sees the glass half full versus a curmudgeon per se. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's just, what do you need? What's the skill set do you need for the position?
Yeah.
And begin to rank those.
And so that's setting your expectation of, it's like the Simon Sinek start with why. Why is this job created?
Correct.
Okay, how do we want this job to be done? Those are the expectations, the words, the optimism, the enthusiasm, the likes to connect to people. And then the what are we looking for are like the, okay, this person fits that bill. This is a question I can ask to see if they're a glass half full kind of person. And then you start to craft your interview questions. And that's how you narrow down your 200 applicants or 50 applicants or whatever it is.
Yeah. So, and you utilize assessments for sure to help then craft the questions that you need in order to understand the experience that this person has had in the past.
Yeah.
To know whether they are an achiever or if they're protectedly motivated as far as their mind. So if you need someone who, for example, in sales, you need someone who's got their eye on the ROI.
Yeah.
And so you need someone who is more resourceful than someone who's selfless.
And can generate their own
Generate their
resources.
own leads. People who tend to be selfless are driven by completing tasks for the sake of completion. But that's not resourceful.
Yeah.
Resourceful is driven by the practical results. So you're both maximizing efficiency and return on their investments. And so how do you measure that? What does that look like in the questions that you ask people for the position? And what examples are you truly looking for when you're interviewing for that position?
Yeah. And having that in your mind of, give me a specific example.
Yep.
I think we've talked about that on the podcast before, but the past behavior is the best prediction of future performance.
That's right.
And so how do we, you'll never get that from a list of 20 interview questions that you find online.
Yeah.
You have to, it's almost like you can't go in with a preset of questions outside of just your base.
Yeah.
Your base topic list. Okay, this is the position of the job.
Yeah.
And here's some examples of questions I need to ask to get them there.
Right.
But when you know what you're looking for, the questions become, okay, I'm not really sure about what he just said there. I think he gives up easily, or they clearly complain about their coworkers, or it's everyone else's fault but mine. And then you can start to look for red flags. You can start to look for green flags. And so, continue with what you're saying though.
So I use a list of competencies as well in order to really dive into what are if you had to list competencies in this particular position, name one position that you have open now, how would you rank these competencies? So is it most important for this position to be customer focused?
Yeah.
And by that, it's anticipating and meeting customer needs, wants, and expectations. Well, of course, on a lot of our skill sets, we need that to be important. But is it also important in this position to be a problem solver?
Yeah.
And so understanding that and ranking the competencies, I think, is critical to really understanding not only the position, but the type of person that you're looking for. And then you create your questions. And like you said, if you're not super content with the answers that you're getting, you probe more.
Yeah.
Because it might not be in their competency realm to have this particular skill set for the position.
Yeah, and it's also incumbent upon you, like we said earlier, to prepare them for the position that they're potentially getting hired for.
If you're hiring from within,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And also from, outside, like this job is going to require you to work weekends. This job is going to require you to work sometimes late.
Yeah.
This job requires you to come in early. This job requires you to hold other people accountable to metrics.
That's right.
And so having that job, also spending your own homework in not having this be a, excuse my language, half-assed position, you have to find it, really think about what this job is going to entail, because it's not fair to the person sitting in front of you if you hire them and then 6 months later they have to quit because you didn't prepare them for what this job actually is.
Right. And so if conflict management is something that is important for the position that you're hiring, which generally is if you're in a management role, then I would want to know in the interview, give me some examples of where you've had to resolve conflict within your team.
Yeah.
And give me specific examples.
Yeah.
And then drill into that to understand, okay, this is a competency that not only is important for this position, but this person knows how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really helps hone in whether you've got the right fit for the position.
So, if we can just summarize, you have to find, first off, it takes some sort of strategy, because if you just start to create just these arbitrary job positions because you need to have however many people on staff, or you feel like you need this many people, this many bodies, basically, you're setting yourself up for
That's
disaster.
your first failure.
That's your first failure. Yeah. No, there's no failures. There's just
you won't be as successful as you would. Now there's neither right or wrong,
bankrupt.
Right? You can do it that way.
Yep.
You can hire that way for sure.
Yep.
My question would be, how's that working for you?
Or how would you ever know
if you did it any differently?
If you have no issue with being upset at people, then, go for it.
Yes.
But if you want to avoid
Right.
any misinterpretation or missed expectations around a specific position, because a lot of people don't care if this is a seasonal part-time employee anyway, sure. And you don't want to
I just need a body.
You don't want to
floor.
spend, then make that very clear to them. Hey, I just need someone. I need you to work the hours, and I need you to come in on time, and this is what I need you to do. And that's also part of your homework.
Yeah.
But if this is a position that has expectations attached to it, the homework around crafting the position before you find anybody.
That's right.
Before you start accepting any applications about a position, you have to do your homework. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for frustration. And potentially, if I had a whiteboard behind me, I would pull a Dan Mann and I would show the cost of a bad hire.
Right.
Because, it's just so amazing how much each little hour of dollars spent on a new hire that doesn't end up working out will cost you. So you're really saving yourself more money than anything.
Yeah, and the exhaustion of managing the bad hire. It's hard to put a price on the time and energy. Now, it's different. It's also different because you can have a bad hire, which I guess is the same if you really think about it, than someone who just doesn't see the job as worth doing.
Yeah.
So that's a totally different topic, which we can do on a different podcast. But it is exhausting when you have a bad fit.
Yeah. And just, we spend a lot of our time with certain clients interviewing for people and screening interviews and it is exhausting, especially because, I think almost all of us are under the opinion that an in-person interview, you learn vastly more than you could ever learn on the phone.
Yeah.
And so, it's just so irritating to have a bunch of applicants at once that you just physically have to do a screening interview for, then set up an in-person interview and then narrow it down. And so I think that's why doing your homework, if knowing that you're going to hire for that position anyway, doing your homework is not that much of a,
it's not much more
of work, but also the net effect of that is, one, you obviously get a better candidate. And two, you become pretty freaking good at interviewing because that is a skill to be able to meet people, to talk on the phone with them, ask probing questions, get certain answers, look for answers, and be able to actually listen, to what they're telling you, because it's your money on the line. And so you have to pay attention to it instead of just being oh yeah, I think I liked them. Oh, they sounded really good or whatever. I really liked that answer.
Or they just came in today and I need somebody, so you're hired.
Yeah. Interview
Don't do
today.
that.
Yeah. Work today. So yeah, just to summarize, crafting that job position is the paramount interview tactic above anything else, is having the expectations set for the position and then finding the people.
Yeah. Understanding the competencies is critical also to understanding the actual job that you need.
Yep.
So you've got the job description. What are the competencies?
Yep.
And then asking the questions from there that really clarify that this person understands
Yep.
this position.
Well, Leslie, you do this work every day, I think, and I know that this has been. I've tried to get really specific on this,
Yep.
but it's sometimes hard because we work with so many different. Our listeners come from many different backgrounds and jobs and positions, and so if you would like more information on this, I'm sure we can pull something together for you.
Absolutely.
So feel free to reach out an email or just send us a question or a comment. So thanks, Leslie, for joining, and I'm excited for the next one we get to do. I don't know
me
what
too.
it'll be on.
We'll figure it out, won't we?
Maybe it probably won't be on bourbon, but we could do something on bourbon.
No. Let's talk about, on our next one, let's talk about dry farm wines.
Yeah, dry farm wine.
Let's introduce the world to dry farm wines.
Yeah, that's a fun one. All right, well, thanks, and tune in next time.
Okay.
That's it for this episode. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave a review on our iTunes channel. We'll see you next week.